Jahawi Batoli, eco-filmmaker and wildlife specialist.
And I'm Melanie, co-founder of Kids Against Plastic and all-round animal lover.
Welcome to your weekly update on the health of our planet and its animals.
This is The Pulse.
Coming up in this week's episode.
There are signs that people are turning their backs on meat.
Great news from South Africa. The hunting of captive bred lions has been outlawed.
And stand by for some of the weird and wonderful eco-news stories that we've unearthed this week.
Hey Ella, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. It looks like a lovely setting there in Kenya.
It is a beautiful day here. But hey, it looks really quite nice where you are too.
Yeah, it makes a change to the usual Nottingham weather.
So, what's caught your eye in the news this week?
Well, as a vegan, a big news story for me this week has been a survey that's happened, and it showed that a quarter of meat eaters in the world are actually trying to reduce their consumption of meat. And the plant-based food market has actually increased by 10% too. So these are really great signs of people moving away from that kind of habit and diet.
I have to admit, I eat meat, but more and more now I'm also trying to lower the amount of meat, but also really try and see where I'm getting my meat from to make sure that it's coming from ethical sources. It's incredible to actually know and see the change that's happening with people in terms of trying to go for a more plant-based diet.
Yeah, and it's a really important change to be seeing because the meat-eating industry is actually really damaging for the planet. And Greenpeace actually said that the farming industry is one of the biggest causes of deforestation, which is really crazy and harmful to think about because of the amount of trees that are being cut down to make space for cattle farming and growth of soya. So this kind of change in people's diets and even just mindsets is really important to see.
You know, for so many people, it seems like such a distant problem because, you know, it could be happening half a world away. But really, we are all part of the problem if we're eating meat.
Yeah, so we're getting a report from conservationist Sam Zwicker from the Peruvian Amazon rainforest to show what frontline deforestation looks like.
This is about 30 hectares of cattle farm behind me. You can see cows for miles. This used to be pristine rainforest. So this one plot here has obviously heavily affected the species that used to live here. This one plot of land has made it so that the local biodiversity has decreased. But on the larger scale, you can picture 30 hectare plots like this are abundant. And so across this kind of landscape that used to be rainforest, you can imagine that there are a lot of animals that used to be able to call this place home that can no longer even cross this space. So this type of deforestation for cattle farming is growing. It's increasing at a grand scale, and it's encroaching upon pristine forests, more remote forests, especially our forests, like the Las Piedras region of Madre Dios, which is where we're standing right now. As the deforestation and the fragmentation increases, especially in these remote areas, it's even more important that we support conservation initiatives around the globe and that we address these socioeconomic drivers that are really causing these issues globally.
Thanks to Sam for that report. Now, Ella, I've come across some eco-news that I find quite bizarre. There are companies out there using bananas and pineapples to make fabrics that are actually making their way into the fashion industry.
Can you tell me more about how that works?
Well, there are these innovative companies that seem to be recycling these materials into fibers that can be made into things like shoes. Even to the point that Hugo Boss has released a line of shoes made from pineapple leather. That's
really interesting because I came across a similar story actually, which is shoes made from grapes, which is a similar idea, and it's by a company called Minuit sur Terre in France, and they're the first fashion brand to use this material.
I mean, these are definitely the most ecological alternatives to leather. And not only leather, because the fashion industry uses lots of plastic, so the move to try and find more eco-friendly materials is huge.
As COP26 approaches, we're starting to see a lot more environmental stories in the news.
We are. So COP26, for those who don't know, is the annual UN conference on climate change, where all the world leaders come together to discuss issues surrounding our climate.
And it's really exciting this year because it's in my part of the world, in Glasgow in Scotland. And a story that really caught my eye surrounding COP was that poorer countries are calling to end smoke and mirrors of richer countries, making dedications and promises and not following through.
You know, coming from a developing country myself, we see the effects of climate change firsthand. And I mean, Kenya, they say that we're going to have one of the worst droughts coming up this year, and that is because of climate change. So these things need to be tackled.
And it's really important that we do make sure this action that's spoken about happens. And I'll actually be in Glasgow for the conference reporting for Pulse.
Take a look at this clip.
Oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. Where did you come from?
Poor sea lion, but it looks like it had a bit of a lucky escape.
Yeah, you know, orcas are the ultimate apex predator in the marine environment, so a sea lion like that would make a lovely mouthful. So that is one lucky sea lion. There's been some great news from South Africa. The practice of canned hunting has been outlawed.
Well, that's incredible news.
I mean, incredibly more so for lions as well, because canned hunting is basically the practice of raising wild animals, and they're bred just to be shot. And there's been a number of organizations that have been working tirelessly to end this practice, including the Ecoflix Foundation.
Will, what's your reaction to the decision to end canned hunting?
Well, Ella, I am hugely encouraged because we've been working on this at Born Free, along with partners like Blood Lions and Humane Society International for many, many years. And actually, I never kind of thought it would reach this point.
Yeah, it's really great, but I imagine the next steps aren't going to be straightforward.
Ella, it is not at all straightforward. Today, there are approximately 300 facilities and as many as 12,000 big cats, including tigers, including leopards, in those facilities. And what are the options that we have? Well, some lucky ones, a very few, may go to sanctuaries, good sanctuaries. Born Free has sanctuaries down in the Eastern Cape of South Africa where we look after a handful of lucky big cats. Some will have to stay where they are, and the whole facility will have to be repurposed. Instead of exploiting animals, it will become a bit like a retirement home, but it will need inspection and it will need money. And since the owner is not going to be making any money because he's no longer exploiting those animals, money's going to have to come from government, I suspect. And very sadly, because of all sorts of health and mental welfare problems that I've seen in some of those big cats, some will have to be put to sleep. And it's, you know, it's a tragedy that that's going to have to happen. But having seen their suffering, I think it is the humane thing for some of those animals. It is really difficult, it is really complex. I hope that as many can live out a good life as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Will.
I have a bit of a feel-good story for you. Now, this little furry marsupial called a bandicoot in Australia has been brought back from the brink of extinction. After 30 years of hard work, they've managed to go from 150 individuals up to 1,500. So that's a really good story to show you that we can bring back animals.
That is really positive news to be hearing, and it actually links pretty well with a story a bit closer to home here in the UK, and that's about beavers. So beavers have been extinct in the UK for about 400 years after being hunted for their fur and their glands. But thanks to the help of organisations like Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, which is actually in the East Midlands near me, they're starting to be reintroduced again. So that's really great to be hearing.
You know, the world needs more positive stories like this because it goes to show that if we put our minds to something, we can make a change. And that's it from us here this week. We'll see you all again.
Bye!